I may have bitten off more than I can chew. I am Joseph, and this is Input English. Let's get started. Recently, I've had a couple of setbacks, things that happened that I didn't expect, and things that I didn't hope for by any means. But it gave me an opportunity to offer you some interesting vocabulary and expressions along this theme. And of course, everything should be in context. We all start out with good intentions, and then things come up, and we discover what's possible. Having setbacks is part of life. It's something we all experience. We don't choose setbacks, but when we have setbacks, we need to respond. So what I've discovered is I have had 2 setbacks, and instead of worrying about them, I am responding, and I realize this is a great opportunity to offer you a lot of expressions and vocabulary that deal with this common problem of having a setback. Now, what I'm not going to do is give you a bunch of advice of things you must do if you have a setback, but I will give you expressions so that if you want to tell somebody what happened and how you responded, you'd be well equipped to do that. So starting out, I had a setback, really 2. One of the setbacks is that even though I intended to record a video to be published today, I couldn't do it. I was prevented from doing it. And so for the first time in 5 months, I did not publish a video. Now, this is not a big deal, but it's a setback. It's something that I had committed to doing, but since I was prevented from doing it, it didn't happen. The other setback I've had recently is related to my commitment to reading Cien Años de Soledad. So this great work of literature by Gabriel Garcia Marquez is a book that I committed to reading, and I sustained a little bit of a setback, so I'm going to share those 2 things. I start out with the expression, bit off more than I can chew. You may hear it in various forms. He bit off more than he could chew. It's an old expression, and it literally tells you what it means. It means that somebody took on something bigger than they could handle, more difficult or larger than they could actually handle. When we sustain a setback, when we have a defeat, when we have a problem that we didn't anticipate, the question is, are we honest about it? Are we genuine? Or are we a phony? So if someone is a phony, if I were a phony, then I would just deny a problem. I would just deny that it happened, or I would blame it on somebody else. If something is phony, or if someone is a phony, then you're talking about someone or something that is false, bogus, untrue. This topic goes back into antiquity, and certainly William Shakespeare had something to say about it. In Hamlet, you will hear a quote, "To thine own self be true." Don't deceive yourself. At least be honest with yourself. Now let's say we encounter somebody who is overly confident. They're really not up to the task, but they act with swagger and overconfidence, and you just know that they are not up to it. You would describe them as having hubris. Hubris is a characteristic of a person who is overconfident and perhaps arrogant. We don't want hubris. No. There are a bunch of common expressions that you will hear that describe the difference between what somebody says and what they can do or what they actually do. You might hear someone say, well, they talk the talk, but can they walk the walk? That is a common expression. Action is more important than words. The nice thing about that expression is it explains itself. In Texas, there's an expression you might hear that says the same thing. That cowboy is all hat, but no cattle. Similarly, it might be said that someone is all talk and no action. All of these expressions deal with whether somebody is genuine or whether they're just talking a good story. Now, none of these are attractive ways for me to behave. So as I introduce these expressions, these are expressions I would like to avoid. In previous episodes, I've talked about some of the expressions and some of the advice that we get from the great Stoic philosophers from 2,000 years ago, and how their advice may be very useful to us in the modern era. But it's also been pointed out that to be a Stoic philosopher or follow Stoic ideals, it's more than just memorizing some one-liners. That is, one-line phrases. And it's not the same as just clicking on a video and hitting the like button. In Stoic philosophy, there is this concept of the dichotomy of control. This was given to us by Epictetus, and basically there are things over which we have some control, or maybe a lot of control, and then there are other things we have no control over. We can't control these other things. And what Epictetus tells us is the ones you can't control, let them be. Ignore them and focus your efforts and your attention on the things you can control. This is what I did yesterday. Something came up, something big, and it was not reasonable for me to go to the park or come into the studio and make a video. It was unreasonable. It would have been outrageous because I had other responsibilities that were foisted upon me. They were given to me and I had no control. Epictetus, no control, don't worry about it. So when I missed publishing a video yesterday, I should not overreact to that because those events were beyond my control. Now that the path is clear, what did I do? Suit up and show up. Oh, that's another great expression. Suit up and show up has ricocheted off of several groups in our society, and nobody really knows where it started. It is used in sporting. So if you come to the game and you put on your uniform and you play the sport, you suit up and show up for the game. You'll hear it. It is used in that setting. It's also used in business. If somebody has a task at work that maybe they don't like and they just have to do it, they just suit up and show up. Maybe going to a meeting, for instance, that they're not looking forward to. Suit up and show up. And the third area you will hear that phrase is in 12-step programs. People who are trying to recover or are recovering from alcohol or drug use using 12-step programs, it is common for suit up and show up to be part of the advice that they get. I have no idea where it originated. It doesn't matter. So if we don't want to be false, if we don't want to be fake, if we want to be genuine, there are some phrases around that. The issue of discerning what is fake and what is real is not a new problem. And back in the 18th century, they started using an expression that we still use today, and that is if something is true and genuine, you might refer to it as the genuine article, an assurance that it's not fake. A person can be the genuine article, the real thing. So I want to be the genuine article. I want to tell the truth and be honest. So when I have a hiccup in my schedule or my expectations, I want to respond appropriately. Hiccups are reflexes that people have in their throat and diaphragm, and hiccups are seen in various species. They can be a nuisance if they're repetitive and long-standing. They can really upset people if they have a bad case of the hiccups over a long time. They have trouble sleeping, for instance. It's very distracting. For most people, hiccups are a very short-lived process. But the word hiccup is used for a minor disturbance in a process. So if you are building a house and there's a problem getting materials and the weather is bad and you have a setback, you could say there was a hiccup in the building schedule. When you use the word hiccup in this setting, not a physiologic description of a reflex, but a process occurring outside the human body, you're referring to something that's minor. There's no such thing as a major hiccup in a process. Hiccups, by definition, are minor disturbances in the process. So I could say that my production of videos has been very consistent, but yesterday I had a hiccup. That is, I didn't record a video yesterday. That would be a hiccup. If I stopped recording videos completely, you wouldn't call that a hiccup. You would call that a defeat or quitting. That would be the end. And if somebody is defeated, it's unreasonable to call that a hiccup. It's a defeat. Okay, now for this second hiccup, my difficulty with Cien Años de Soledad. That book is magnificent, and I am reading it, and I've read one chapter, but the going is slow. It's a slog. It is hard. Why? Well, I think there are a couple of reasons. One, this book is recognized as a great work of literature. And so one would expect that a great work of literature would have a lot of rich vocabulary and interesting expressions. To the language learner, that translates to expressions that you may not know. So the first thing that I noticed when I started reading this book is I didn't know the vocabulary. Now, there are a couple of reasons that I might not know that vocabulary, both owing to the fact that I'm a language learner, not a native speaker. One is it was written by an educated Colombian. So some of the vocabulary may be somewhat specific to Colombia. There may be words that they use that I didn't learn because a lot of the input that I got over the past couple of years originated in Spain. So the vocabulary I was studying with Comprehensible Input may be a little different than what he wrote in his book. The other thing is the pure density of the expressions in a work of literature. Both of these phenomena are desirable to me. They just mean that it's not easy. So what I was faced with is the difference between my expectations and reality. What I expected is that I would just sit down and start reading this book and that it would be relatively easy and quick. What I found in the first chapter is that it was much more difficult than I expected, and there were a lot of words and expressions I didn't understand. I reread sections multiple times, and I had to look up some words, not because I want to look up all these words, but because the story wasn't making sense until I knew what that word meant. The trend is very positive. The beginning of the chapter and the end of the chapter were very different experiences. What happens here is you get used to the writing style of the author. And so I can see a path forward where I will be able to read this book. And I do not plan on putting it aside and reading it 5 years from now. No, This book is on the current list. It's just going to take me more time, and I think it's going to be worth it. So there are a couple of reasons I made this video. One was to introduce a lot of expressions and vocabulary that are specific to this topic, things that will be valuable to you. The other reason is I think it's important for people creating content to be genuine, to be the genuine article and not be phony. In life, we all have setbacks. In language learning, we have setbacks. Perhaps you've set up your schedule and your expectations, and things are taking longer than expected. The material that you have chosen is harder than expected, or perhaps something came up and you were prevented from getting any input for a period of time. Well, what we could say is now it's time to suit up and show up. We don't want to beat ourselves up for this problem, and we certainly don't want to worry too much about things we can't control. But when it's possible, it's time to get back into it. Get back into the routine, get back into the habits, and continue on our journey. And if you like videos like this, be sure to click on this one next. See you soon.